If you guys are anything like me, then I'm sure you guys have probably posed the question in your mind of what would happen if devil fruits were in another universe? A universe where maybe they won't be too outlandish. Maybe something like My Hero? Now, I pose this question due to the fact that quirks and devil fruits are really not that off from each other. They come with their own drawbacks and bonuses. And today I asked the question of what would happen if a young Izuku Midoriya was to come across the pawpaw fruit. So yeah, in this fanficky video, we're going to be covering exactly what would happen from beginning to end. So stick around to all of these parts, turn on those post notifications if you haven't already so you never miss a video, and slap a like on the video to let me know that you guys want more of what if Deku ate the pawpaw fruit. Enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Alright, so for the purposes of this video, first we have to get a couple of things straight. Number one, Izuku will be the only person to get a devil fruit ability in this world. Number two, Izuku's father will somehow randomly come across this fruit. Now, we could dive into this and I could probably make some insane reason as to why he's the only person with this fruit, but we're just going to chalk it up to it's something that was passed down from his family from generation to generation. And number three, Izuku is not going to be Kuma. He is essentially just going to be having his powers, but Izuku may or may not be retaining his original canon personality and the way that he was raised. All right, that cool? Yes, no, maybe? All right, perfect. Anyways, so a good spot to probably begin this video would probably be exactly in the spot that the anime would have us start everything off. Izuku laying down on the ground after having been completely pummeled down by Bakugo and his goonies. After this would end up happening, Izuku would have a flashback to when he was told that he is not the same. He's different. He's quirkless. Izuku would have his life pretty much be destroyed in front of him in a matter of one sentence. And after this happens, the events of the canon story would go down just like we all remember. Izuku would then be told by his mother that it's okay and that she's sorry, and eventually Izuku would go on to have a very interesting next 2 years of his childhood. Eventually, Izuku would make it to the age of 6 years old, and his father Hisashi would have ended up coming home with some sort of a weird little treasure chest looking box. Izuku would look at it and ask his father Hisashi what in the world that is and why he has some sort of treasure chest. He would ask us go through it, and Hisashi would turn towards Izuku and say that it's just something that his father gave him before he died. And he says that he went to go pick up the last of the things from the house, seeing as his mom ended up passing away as well, sadly. You know, like Inko would also hug him from the side saying that it'll be okay, you know what I mean? And Izuku would just be like, yeah, I'm really sad that they died. And then Hisashi would be like, I am too, kiddo. From here, the family would go and have dinner. And Izuku would have been super excited because they were supposed to have a delicious dessert, right? Inko had baked this awesome cake. However, she would have ended up getting a bit too distracted and the cake would have burned just a bit. She ultimately would still put frosting on it and nobody would be able to tell anything when suddenly Hisashi and Inko would bump into each other and she would end up dropping the cake on the ground. Now Izuku would watch this all happen as if it was in slow motion. He would feel more pain in this singular moment than Zoro did when he took the pain of all of the not all of them, but Luffy, right? And with this happening, Izuku would just feel like everything just got ruined. Eventually, he would be just about to begin crying when suddenly Hisashi would say, wait, I have another dessert, right? He goes to the chest, he opens it with the key, and then he gives Izuku this weird looking fruit, saying that he'll let him take the first bite. For some reason, this fruit has managed to stay fresh for generations on generations. And it's just a decoration thing. It's up to him what he wants to do with it. Nobody has tried to eat it before because it just looks funny. But I mean, Izuku is more than willing to, eat it himself. And Izuku would say that, he's down. As from here, he looks at the fruit and he just looks at its weird shape, how it looks like a genuine paw with a stem at the top. And Izuku doesn't think nothing of it. He cuts a piece off and then he shoves it in his mouth and it would taste rancid. It would taste putrid, and Izuku ultimately would swallow it, not wanting his parents to think that it was bad. But after this, Izuku would immediately have vomit come up his mouth, and he would rush towards the bathroom where Izuku would ultimately hurl. And then from here, his parents would immediately know that, yeah, that something ain't right with that fruit, right? But Izuku, upon getting up and putting his paw to the window of, not the window, but the mirror of the bathroom, Izuku would generate some strange power in his paw. And from here, this energy, this repulsive force would shoot him flying into the wall. Izuku would get knocked out by the force, and eventually Hisashi and Inko would walk into the bathroom only to see the destruction on the mirror and the destruction of the wall. Izuku completely passed out on the floor, and Hisashi would say that they need to rush him to the hospital. They would do so, and Izuku would wake up about a couple of hours later, finally, to some amazing news. The doctor would say that he doesn't even know how exactly this happens, but it looks like Izuku might have just been a late bloomer. Izuku got his quirk after all, and Izuku would turn towards the direction of his father and mother, and they would all begin to cheer like so loud. Izuku would say that finally, now Bakugo will be his friend again, and Inko would give him this worried look of like, wait, has Bakugo been mean to you? And Izuku's like, no, he's just teased me just a little bit. And Inko would look down in sadness saying, well, you guys are our kids, whatever, like I'll let it slide. And ultimately Izuku would smile, he's just having a great day. Like he just got the best news of his life. You know what I mean? And ultimately Izuku and his family would make their way home, celebrating this joyful news. As eventually Izuku would make his way back to school the next day, and he would show Bakugo that he finally got a quirk. And Bakugo would turn towards Deku and say, maybe you're in as useless as I thought, Deku. As from here, he would go on to say, you know what, maybe I was a bit mean to you. As Izuku would turn to him and say, it's okay. As Izuku from here would go on to tell Bakugo his quirk is pretty cool. And Bakugo would say, yeah, whatever, your quirk might be a little cool or whatever, but it's not as cool as mine. You just have paws on your hand and you can shoot some weird energy, but that's it. I have explosions. I'm a flashy hero. I'm gonna become #1 someday and you're gonna eat my dust, Deku. And Deku would laugh and say, yeah, whatever. As from here, we would just kind of imagine the screen going dark and text appearing up on the screen saying, 8 years later. Eventually, we would zoom in on Deku in the back of the class, just kind of trying to relax as everybody else would be going nuts at the fact that the teacher would announce that he knows they all want to become heroes. Bakugo gets on top of his desk only to proclaim that he and Deku are the only hero material in this school, and that all of them are just extras that they need to get out of the way because they're the only ones that are going to make it to the big leagues, that they'll send them a post note from their useless jobs as sidekicks. And from here, the teacher would be like, Bakugo, calm down. And Deku would just literally be chilling, sitting down, trying to enjoy himself, trying to repel the noise that is coming at him. Izuku ultimately would let the class finish, and Bakugo would ask him what he has to do later on today. Izuku ultimately would tell him that it's his mom's birthday and that unfortunately, he can't really make it today. So Bakugo would say, whatever, Deku. He'll just go hang out with his other friends. And so that's exactly what he would do. Deku from here would grab his things, make his way home, and he realizes to himself that he is quite bored. Now, y'all like, wait, what do you mean he's quite bored? Well, Izuku's bored of taking the same path home every single day. So Izuku decides to switch it up and take this different tunnel path. He would begin making his way there, and 5 minutes into the trip, almost getting home, Deku would have the sewage lid pop out in front of him and some green goo lunge at him before then saying, "Give me your body, kid. I didn't know that freak was in town." Ultimately, however, Izuku, looking at all this would be happening, would say, "No way, get off of me." As from here, the monster itself would be shot back and would splatter all over the nearby wall. And Izuku would simply say he doesn't have time for this. As after all this would go down, Izuku would then turn towards the direction of his house and begin walking again. All Might would pop back out about a minute later and Izuku would already be long gone. All Might would question how in the world the sludge villain ended up there, but the sludge villain just would stay quiet, not saying a thing, seeing as it's knocked out. Eventually the sludge villain would wake up in prison and would be cursing underneath its breath at Izuku Midoriya, whoever that kid was that threw him in jail. From here, All Might would wonder what happened, but ultimately put it in the back of his mind, and eventually, we just kind of end up getting whatever scene comes to, well, our minds, I guess. The only thing that ends up going down after this is Izuku goes home and just begins to celebrate his mother's birthday. That's pretty much as simple and easy as I can put it. From here, We would then get another brief time skip. However, this time it's not quite a long one as the last one. It won't be 8 years, and instead it would simply be 10 months. Izuku from here would begin making his way towards the direction of UA, walking inside of his halls and eventually turning to see Bakugo right next to him. He would ask Bakugo how he thinks he's gonna do, and Bakugo would say that this is gonna be a breeze. Somebody like him won't have any trouble with this, and that they're both gonna get into UA and become the greatest heroes just like they've always talked about. Izuku would say of course they are, and from here Bakugo would have like this chuckling like smile on his face, as from here they would just hear present mic. Ida ultimately would still end up interrupting just like he does in canon, and eventually Izuku and Bakugo would make their way outside. Once there, Izuku would begin making his way towards the direction of where the front of the line is, and once he arrives there, or once he's like halfway there, Ida would actually end up stopping him, saying, "Hey, what are you doing? You can't go over there and distract that girl." Izuku would turn towards Ida and say, "Huh, what'd you say?" And Ida would say, "I know what you're wanting to do. You want to go over there and distract that girl and ruin her chances of getting into UA, aren't you? Well, I'm not gonna let that happen." And Izuku would be like, "Bro, calm down. Like, I'm literally just trying to go towards the front." And Ida just keeps talking and talking and talking, and Izuku ultimately gets tired of it. Izuku then simply lets out one word, but repeats it twice, and he says, "Bye-bye." As from here, he holds his hand out in front of Ida and just straight uses his quirk, quote unquote, or his devil fruit abilities on Ida, sending Ida flying about 2 hours away. Now, upon realizing this, Ida would be completely awestruck, and nobody in the teacher's lounge would realize this due to the fact that they're not exactly watching Izuku in particular, and eventually President Mike would make his presence known before then telling them to go, go, go. There's no countdowns in a real battle. Everybody would immediately begin making their way towards where the robots are at, and Izuku would immediately use both hands, aim them behind his back, just like Bakugo does, considering that, he kind of like takes after Bakugo in some respect, and he begins to shoot the repulsive force, shooting him forward, just like I believe Kuma is probably able to do for himself, right? And so he would blitz in front of a robot and just straight use his paw to just slam it into said robot, just like Neji does when he's using his 64 palm strike. Bam! One blow would be more than enough to straight send this robot into orbit. And Izuku would then turn towards his attention to all of the other robots, beginning to run in and destroy multiple robots, and ultimately destroy UA's previous record set by All Might on how many robots have been destroyed in one go by one singular person. Izuku from here would smile and say that that's more like it, as eventually, after enough time would pass, Izuku would realize one thing, and that's that the ground would have begun to shake. Now, Izuku would think to himself that that must be the 0-pointer and that he doesn't really feel like dealing with that. So he begins making his way away from it. However, that's when Deku would notice from the corner of his eye a girl begging for help. Realizing that nobody's going to help her, Izuku would get the eye of the tiger stare, right? And he would blitz over towards her direction. Ultimately, right as the 0-pointer would be just about to stomp on Deku and Uraraka, and the pro heroes are about to shut the 0-pointer down, Izuku would hold one hand up, and with a calm expression, he would simply use his ability to send the 0-pointer flying into space. Now, the 0-pointer, once sent flying, Izuku would then ask Uraraka if she's okay, and she would be clenching her eyes in complete and utter terror. But once she opens her eyes, she realizes that nothing happened, and then she sees that there is no 0-pointer in front of her. It's just a blue sky. Izuku would go on to give her towards a recovery girl, and eventually Izuku would make his way home, only to have to wait about 4 days before finally receiving his acceptance letter. After this, I can imagine that his family would be very excited, and he would go on to have some sort of celebratory occasion after this, going out to eat dinner or something, but eventually would then time skip or flash forward to when Izuku would find himself inside the classroom, watching as Bakugo and Ida are arguing about how Bakugo has his feet up on the desk. Now, Izuku would then walk over, and Ida, seeing him, would feel rage in his heart. He turns towards Izuku and asks him what in the world that was for, and what the big idea was of him using his quirk to send him 2 hours away. If it wasn't for the fact that he explained this, and he showed it on the film that Izuku actually did do that, Ida probably would have never even been allowed into UA. And Izuku would turn towards him and say, "Well, you made it, so you're welcome." As from here, he would then go on to look at Bakugo and ask him, what he thinks about the blue-haired boy. And Bakugo would say that he's very annoying. Izuku would ask if he thinks they should get rid of him. And Ida would like shiver at the thought of this, as Izuku would say, should I use my quirk again, or do you want to leave us alone? As Ida would walk away, and eventually Aizawa would make his presence known, going on to tell the class that it took them 8 seconds to be quiet, eventually telling them all to meet him outside and put these on, throwing them the outfits for the UA quirk apprehension test. From here, Aizawa would go on to explain the rules and tell them that whoever comes in last place will be expelled, no exceptions. And everybody immediately would begin to shiver in their timbers. Everyone except for Bakugo and Izuku, as well as all the other people who are more confident in their abilities, like Todoroki, Momo, and more of the show-offy characters, right? But eventually we would then have all of the tests go by, and Izuku would actually get very good scores on most of them, actually ranking 3rd place. Now the only reason that I'm not giving Izuku even higher placement or 1st place is just due to the general nature of the pawpaw fruit. Now the pawpaw fruit has various different uses that he could use in the story. However, the quirk apprehension test isn't one that's going to use the ability as much. However, the ball through, I will like to say, that would get the same amount of points as Uraraka's Infinity, due to the fact that Izuku would be able to launch that ball into space easily, considering that we saw the Straw Hats get thrown by Kuma for 3 entire days to the sky, only for each of them to all be separated and eventually give us the beautiful Marineford arc. However, this time there's none of that. Instead, we kind of just see a baseball floating through the air and it says, all by myself. After that angelic vocal performance, I'm sure many of you guys are probably begging and foaming out of the mouth for more, but y'all gotta wait on it, you know what I mean? Like I can't just let these angelic vocal cords go loose all the time, you know what I mean? Like I gotta really blue ball you guys every now and then, you know? But regardless though, what would pretty much end up going down after this is that we would end up getting a scene in which Izuku and Bakugo would literally just walk off as if they didn't care. And Aizawa would stop Izuku in his tracks, asking him if he truly did use the full capability of his quirk, telling him that he feels as though he's holding something out. And Izuku would say that he's going to have to keep watching him and find out those things on his own. He's not just going to reveal his powers in front of everybody else to jump. Obviously, he used as much as he could, and he did do his best on all the events that he had access to. But right now, these events don't show the capabilities of everybody. These are just generalized tests. If you truly want to see how strong people are, maybe make us fight each other or something like that. Just some food for thought though, Teach. Anyways, I'll see you guys tomorrow. He would walk off and eventually the next day would finally come by. Izuku, once he would make his way towards his last class, he would realize that loud footsteps would be coming from outside the room. Everybody would immediately stare at the door only to find out that it's All Might. And he would say, I am here, coming to teach this class like a normal person. He would then go on to take a remote out from his back and reveal to all of the students that their UA uniforms and their hero costumes are there and that they all need to get changed because everybody knows the clothes make the pro.